Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, hey, did you know the customer can't log in? Or why you shouldn't quickly upgrade a critical system right before you go to sleep? What year is it? Boss learns expensive lesson. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Hey, did you know the customer can't log in? Or why you shouldn't quickly upgrade a critical system right before you go to sleep? Disclaimer, this is a pretty long one, longer than I expected. It's not a story that works using different parts, as the events were spread over only one morning, a pretty damn intense morning. Also decided to keep it as a single story, because it shows for me the value of admitting your mistakes and taking your responsibility when it's most needed. First off, I drink coffee, quite a bit of coffee. It's a very nice way to wake up and get my brain up to speed. There are some things that work just as good, or even better, including, but not limited to, chili, waking up on a summer morning and then eating breakfast in sunlight. Oh, and getting a call at 8:32, 2 minutes after business opens, if you can check why the customer can't log in. Right, time to introduce the cast for this one. $Me, probably pretty obvious. Also the guy who did dumb things and then managed to fix them without data loss. $Sup, my supervisor, who gave me the call. Customer contact person from the customer. Great person, provided helpful feedback, never rude, and understands and respects that fixing software isn't always as easy as people think. Sysadmin, dude who manages our IT equipment. The critical system I mentioned is basically a sort of ERP system the customer uses to log all their work. We've developed an in-house system over the past few years internally. I inherited that system when I started working for my employer. Because of the very old tech stack that was used, it was the time to upgrade to something more modern and more useful. Customer is an old friend of my boss, and they happen to be the perfect test case for a newer version of this software. We sort of supplied it as a gift, and only required them to test it, and use it properly, and to provide feedback on things that don't work that well yet. They've been great in all those aspects. Customer is basically almost a unicorn. The first major update came a couple of weeks after the initial release, with me pushing the update over a holiday weekend. I had a long weekend planned, and almost forgot to push the update before the work week started. Cue me thinking, well, I have to push the update, you know what, I'll do that right before I go to sleep. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was to continue playing games instead of pushing the update first. You know when there's that tiny little voice internally saying maybe I should take responsibility, meh, how bad could it be? And then you ignore it? Well, basically around 11 p.m. I hopped onto the VPN, pulled my newest changes, thinking it would be just a quick update. It turned out to be 2 hours of debugging, adding some more code, and then having to push the update. Of course I tested the changes first, all good. And then, without noticing, made the mistake of copying the same files to the production server. I put the word same between quotation marks, because I pushed all the files instead of just the changed files. That's a mistake I came to notice the next morning. Tuesday morning, while dreaming of sleeping for hours on my day off. Phone rings, and it's the phone number from work. 8:32 a.m., well FSCK. Sup, hey $me, customer contact just called that they can't log in, can you check what's up? I've never had a coffee that good. I only slept for 5 hours, and I was wide awake and extremely focused within 2 minutes. Felt for a few moments like I slept for 12 hours, and had a whole can of coffee. I also seemed like the first person here to think that logins not working is probably a bad thing. Hopped on the VPN, checked the server logs, and there's nothing strange there. Checked the customer site, and noticed that there is no table called users. Now remember how I said I pushed all the files? I didn't clean my published directory at my own PC, and since I wanted to do the update quickly, I didn't double-check the files I was going to push. It included all the correct files, and empty database. Thinking internally, well, this is very bad, but I'm glad it is a long weekend and we have daily backups. So I called $sup to give him an update on the situation. $me, so, about that error they got. I accidentally overwrote the database with an empty one. Luckily we have the daily backups, so I can just restore the one from last night. Can you send me the most recent one? $sup, sure, you'll receive it within a few minutes. Time to drink a cup of coffee and call $customer contact to bring them up to speed about what's up. Side note, I've messed up once or twice in a previous job, not as bad as this, but I never had direct contact with customers. This story opened my eyes as to how well I've learned to handle critical, high-stress situations like this one. $me, hello, this is $me from $Company. I'm calling to give you an update on the situation. Customer contact, oh, is it bad, did we mess something up? They're not that familiar with tech and computers, so instead of blaming us, they expect themselves being at fault, before blaming anyone/anything else. They shouldn't be so humble because they've found bugs that we weren't able to spot during testing, even though it should be quite obvious. Me, no, I'm the one who messed up during the update. I broke a few things, so right now we're restoring a backup from last weekend, so nothing should have changed for you. I'll update you as soon as possible. After that call, I did get the backup archive from the night before. I know the rule that you don't have backups until you actually tested the backups you create. Boy, do I wish I knew that rule at that moment. We didn't have backups from that version, only from our internal test version, a very old one, in a Docker container we no longer used. The backups from the days before were all exactly the same. I called back $sup to explain the situation, and how I basically messed up pretty hard. I got the phone number from $sysadmin. Luckily he was awake, even though it was also his day off, and it was only 9:30 by then. He was able to initiate a VM restore. We also make full backups of those, and they were tested before we went live, thank God, from the night before. This would take at least an hour to run, and I was able to give the customer an ETA for the uptime. I called them and notified them that we expected to be online at 11 o'clock, 2.5 hours after we noticed the downtime. I also admitted we made mistakes and that policies would be set up to avoid situations like this. While waiting for the VM restore, I started working out the steps of what exactly went wrong, and how to fix those things, and prevent future situations like this. Not a form of CYA, well, maybe sort of, because I wrote down the facts of what I did wrong, and how we could prevent it, but there's no point in making a bad mistake, and then not learning from it. Not wanting to learn makes those things pointless to me. Anyway, after the VM restore we still had issues with the config. I had to make more calls, I hate making calls actually, to $customer contact to update the ETA with I'm not sure when but hopefully very soon, and call $sysadmin again to notify him of the issues. This part might be anticlimactic, or maybe it is climactic, because usually those things end with the tech being blamed for everything, possible people being fired, or at least getting a formal warning. After the VM issues were fixed, I had already cleaned up my project, revised my published scripts. I also documented which things went wrong, where miscommunication happened, how we could have prevented the whole mess. One big part is that I decided to push updated during daytime and the weekends. Being very tired and pushing an important update doesn't go together. We managed to sort the whole situation out before lunchtime, without any data loss. The customer had half a day of downtime, but instead of calling us all morning to put blame on us, they temporarily reverted back to their old Word forms, and then put all the information in the system afterwards. Remember how I said this was a unicorn? Now what I'm most proud of, is that I was able to keep everyone updated during the situation. The customer knew that we messed up, that it was bad, but I was able to communicate that, without giving them details about the situation. They knew the blame was on us, and they appreciated we took the blame, and that we jumped onto it so quickly. It was the first time that I've seen a customer respond in a way that says, well, tech people are also just people, they make mistakes. Besides that, this mess gave insight into gaps in my own work process. By documenting that, things become better for everyone. So the moral of the story, I guess, is that even if you make a very bad mistake, probably just not in tech, you're usually better off admitting it and taking the heat. Worst case, you might get blamed and fired, but at that point you should also wonder if you're working at the right employer, at least if it's a genuine mistake. Because the story is so long, here's a TLDR for y'all. I'll quickly push the update. Half asleep, what could go wrong? Well, just about everything. What year is it? While I'm primarily engineering new solutions, occasionally I need to help our maintenance with some tasks that they aren't currently equipped/trained to do. In this particular instance, a large machine, roughly 80 feet long, had an HMI, human-machine interface, computer die. This computer was roughly 15 years old at this point, so it was not really a surprise, but of course it died at a time we needed it to process some parts that absolutely needed to ship ASAP. Maintenance had already looked at it, and had gone through the levels of bureaucracy needed to call me in for help. I'm always willing to help keep the machines that pay for me running, but just asking me would be too easy. I do want to stress at this point that while the head of maintenance and I are definitely not best pals, I have nothing but respect for the personnel in that department. The maintenance guy, we'll just call him Bob, and I get the computers swapped out and start setting up the new one. The new computer had never been activated or set up, as we use these for a number of purposes, and buying and pre-setting them up would be way too expensive. Apparently have a machine bill out at $XXX per hour down instead is a cost savings, but hey, I'm just a dumb engineer and not an accountant. This brand new, 10-year on a shelf, computer has never even been booted up before, so Windows XP, this was 3 years ago, was never activated. This is when Bob and I decide to do a hard drive swap with the old system, as the two computers were nearly identical. This ended up being quite the process, helped by the fact that upper management feels that standing there and watching us work until they got bored was going to help the process out. The shop manager specifically asked me how late I would stay to fix it. He couldn't wrap his head around my answer of "until it's fixed, don't worry," and asked at least 3 times how late I would stay to fix it. He never did get a different answer. I am salary, but the 2 or 3 times a year I need to stay late to save the day is fine with me. I make sure they know what I've done. Fast forward to about half an hour after quitting time for me, and we have it all buttoned up, but the HMI software, Indusoft, which is a steaming pile of crap, is giving the strangest license error. We reboot and this time it works, reboot again, and it's broken. Someone has figured out this issue at this point, I'm sure. Well, after about an hour of D*king around, Bob says, "Hey, why is the date 1900 and didn't we already set the clock in BIOS?" Well, long story short, it turns out that sitting on a shelf for a decade will kill a BIOS battery, and in this case the date was set to something somewhat random, also no date not set boot error. Well, apparently, our Indusoft license doesn't expire in the future, but also doesn't exist in the past. We put a very large note on the screen saying not to shut the machine off until a new battery could arrive, and that was the end of that. Boss learns expensive lesson. Hello fellow subs. This may not be a typical /Tales from Tech Support post, but this just seemed the most appropriate place for the story. It's the year 1996 and our 5-person company was using PCs that ranged from 8088s, running DOS 3.3, to 380 SIXS, running Windows 3.11, first OS we had that could be networked. Okay, so we had only the one PC with W3.11, but we were ready to network. I get to work one morning, and there is a box sitting at my station with a brand new Intel 486/66 full tower PC from the Blue Shirts and Nerd Platoon store with a note from my boss to get the machine set up for use. Aside from the obvious removal of all the preloaded crapware, I would need to install a CDRW drive, a second physical hard drive, network card, and all of our company software. No problem, not my first rodeo. I unbox the PC and slice open the anti-tamper, warranty-voiding security tape fastening the case to the rear panel. Remove the screws holding the case and slide the enclosure off. I had to replace the IDE cables going to the CD-ROM and HD, each was a single device cable, so I could connect both HDs and both CDs on the primary and slave ISE bus respectively. I also had to make a couple Molex Power T adapters for the hard drives. Finally install an ISA NIC for Ethernet. So I've got everything installed, cables are plugged in and mounting screws are all tight. I decide to power up the system with the case off just to make sure everything's working before I button it up and commission it into service. I plug everything in, monitor, mouse, keyboard, etc., and power up the PC. Everything looks great, boots up fast, and all the drives are working. Our company softwares get installed, and I'm getting ready to take an early celebratory lunch when the boss looks over my shoulder into the exposed motherboard cavity, pulls out a pencil and places the eraser squarely between the fan blades of the CPU and tells me the fan couldn't possibly be that necessary. Before he even has finished his sentence, even before my brain could grasp what I was seeing, the monitor goes blank, the power supply fan shut down, the LED light in the case, and the one on the motherboard all went dark. I yanked out the power cable, but it was too late. The magic smoke had been released, we could already smell the aroma of cooked silicon wafer. I looked at the boss and just nodded my head in stunned disbelief to answer his question. Now, he tells me to remove all of our stuff, button up the case and rebox it so he can return it for a replacement. Our company softwares are already installed, so I yank out their HD, plug it into another PC's IDE port and proceed to manually delete the files and folders that I just installed. Before the end of day I've finished and he takes the system back to BS and NP store. The next morning there is another box with a brand new Intel 486/66 at my station. I asked boss how it went and he grumbled as he gestured me to get to work on the new computer. Later that day, I learned from rslash gal that he had spent the remainder of the previous day trying to talk BSNP store into accepting the damaged PC. He even pointed out that he had purchased their Premier extended warranty plan, but to no avail. I figured the first thing they did was open the box and discover the anti-tamper warranty voiding tape had been cut and promptly refused to grant the replacement. All told it cost more than $3,900 USD, plus my hourly, to discover that CPU fans are in there for a reason.